Hey Slate Plus listeners. I hope you've been enjoying Slow Burn Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. The Slow Burn team and I wanted to give you a little something extra this week. It's an interview with two special guests, Silvana Nova and Larry Hermsen. Silvana is the person you see raising a fist on this season's cover art, and Larry is the one who made the photo in 1978. We had a beautiful conversation about how they turned it into a poster to raise money to fight the Briggs Initiative. And we talked about how gender non-conforming gays like Silvana and Larry, street queens they called themselves, had their own flourishing culture in San Francisco outside the mainstream gay scene. They also had a lot to say about the threats queer people are facing today. I'm so excited for you to hear it. Enjoy. Why don't you start by telling me your names and what you do? Silvana, let's start with you.
I'm Silvana Nova. I'm retired, although I'm pretty much fully employed in volunteer efforts leading up to the election this year. I've been involved in politics since the early 70s, and I lived in San Francisco from 75 to 91.
And I'm Larry Hermsen, and from 76 to 2007, I lived in San Francisco and Oakland, and I also was politically involved since the early 70s, starting with the Vietnam War and then coming out and working mainly around gay and lesbian issues.
And what brought you to San Francisco?
I was living in Boston because I knew I needed to go to a big city to come out. I'm from a small town in Iowa. Boston was just too conservative. I mean, I helped start a gay center there, and the membership voted not to be at all political. So I thought, oh, God, how can you be queer and not be political, you know?
Yeah.
So I was out of there. So I decided to visit the West Coast. Right when I arrived in the fall of 76 was this gathering called Faggots and Class Struggle in Southern Oregon. And that's where I met Silvana and a number of other people from San Francisco, and I really liked them, so I decided to move to San Francisco.
Wow, so Silvana, it was you who brought Larry out there. It was all you.
Among others, among many other fabulous people.
What about you, Silvana? How did you end up in San Francisco?
Well, I spent my deformative years from 12 till about 19 or 20 in Florida. And I just had to get out of there. So the nearest big city was Atlanta. So I moved to Atlanta. And Atlanta was even more conservative than Boston. And so I knew I had to get out. And I had a lot of friends who had kind of emigrated to San Francisco or would come back and tell me all the stories about San Francisco. And it was just like, ooh, that sounds like fun. That's what I want to do.
Silvana, when did you start performing in drag?
Like 2 days after I moved to San Francisco. I mean, in Atlanta, I'd done a lot of drag. I mean, just to go out, like, oh, let's go to the disco. Yeah, well, where's the lipstick? Where's the glitter? But then when I moved to San Francisco, it became much more serious, and people just lived in drag. But it was like what we called gender F.
You can say it.
Gender fuck.
Yeah.
So you'd wear dresses, but you might wear them over a pair of jeans. Or you'd show your hairy legs and wear, Doc Martens or whatever. It was like, it was fluid before fluidity happened. No matter how we presented, we didn't want to identify ourselves or put ourselves in a box of any kind.
Did you have a drag persona, or did you have, a signature style? What did you do?
Fabulous. That was his style. Fabulous.
Excuse me. What was my persona? Well, certain people thought I was way too bourgeois in my presentation. I was criticized for reading Vogue magazine. It's true.
That is terribly bourgeois.
I mean, we were all crazy kids, and so we were just experimenting and going as far as we could with it. And so we were all doing that in our own way, in our own personal style. And my personal style, at times, is this right, Larry, had a certain elegance?
Yes, but I think your drag was sort of on the cutting edge of whatever was happening in fashion at the time, where I was more interested in vintage. I would do a lot of 40s stuff, and, kind of mixed in with the hippie aesthetic, mixing, quote unquote, male and female clothes. And I mean, the point was never to pass as a woman. We didn't wear breasts or shave our chests or any of that. And my attitude was, I'm going to wear whatever I damn well please. I don't care if it's supposed to be for men or women. If it fits and I like it, I'll wear it,
I mean, we were all very visible, and we were all, this is coming off the hippie movement too, so a lot of us had long hair. Larry used to have gorgeous long hair. We were very visible, and we all lived, San Francisco small, so we all lived in or near the Castro. So it was like we were part of that community, even though we were kind of outcasts. Do you think we were outcasts?
Well, depending on who you talk to, I suppose. I think there certainly were people in the gay movement who thought we were presenting too radically and that we needed to clean up our act. And in fact, before one of the gay liberation parades, they told us to clean up. And of course, that just prompted us to be more outrageous.
Yeah, they wanted everybody to come in like suits and stuff. Because the coverage of Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco was always, like the drag queens and the leather queens and the dykes on bikes. And it was like everything outrageous that any normal person would get offended by. So let's all come in suits and let's act straight. And then they won't have anything to photograph. And it was like we all just said, fuck you.
What year was this that they were asking you to do that?
77 maybe, or 78?
I think it was 78 because this is part of the whole history of the Briggs movement.
I want to rewind a little bit. Thinking about the Castro in the 1970s, I think many people think of the sort of Castro clone look. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about what it was like to be engaging in gender fuckery in that kind of environment. What was the social scene like for people who didn't fit that mold?
Well, we were pretty much excluded from clone culture, and there were bars that didn't allow drag queens in.
Oh, wow.
Like we wanted to go there anyway.
Well, right, there was that.
And so many of us, I mean, I never had a choice. Really, I couldn't be a clone. I mean, I was a sissy boy from when I was a child. I mean, Larry, we had this whole group that was like sissy power, and it was, for us, very empowering. But it was also like, well, yeah, this is who we are. And I mean, we can't hide it, so why should we? I think the mainstream gay movement at that time, which a lot of America saw as completely radical, seemed to us very mainstream.
Yeah.
So I almost immediately fell into that. And that was also a big era of foment in gay politics in San Francisco. There was this group called BAGL, B-A-G-L, Bay Area Gay Liberation. And it was just, like any political group that has like high ideals and all that. There were so many internecine disturbances going on. And it was like the straight identified gay men and the sissies. And it was just, like...
Yeah, there was a division between the Marxists and the anarchists and...
the goddess worshippers.
The goddess worshippers and the
We're not kidding.
The gay, yeah, this is true. And the gay people who wanted to support gays in the military, and the other people who thought that that was horrible and we shouldn't be supporting the military in any way. And it created a lot of splits.
It's just funny because there's, in a way, it's so comforting to hear about that because obviously in social movements today and social circles today, there are similar divisions. It's just comforting to hear that. But also, I don't think the divisions today are between the Marxists and the goddess worshippers and the anarchists necessarily. There's just not enough leftist infrastructure for those divisions to become clear. But Silvana,
there was in San Francisco, and especially that. I mean, San Francisco's always been a hotbed of activism and progressive politics and creativity, poetry, art.
And Larry, when did your art practice begin? And what kind of art did you do?
Well, I studied architecture in college. I was always a drawer. And once I moved to San Francisco, I worked as a graphic artist and I did some photography. And I just felt like I wanted to do some art that was political and gay, queer, whatever. And the three guys I lived with were also graphic artists. We formed this collective called Too Much Graphics because we all had daytime graphics jobs, but then we were doing this stuff in the off hours, more graphics, and it was like too much graphics. So. And so I had this idea for a poster, the one that you all know. And, I asked Silvana to be the model. I
realize now that it would probably behoove our listeners if you would just describe the poster for us.
Oh, sure. Well, it's black background, big pink triangle, and sort of out of this pink triangle, Silvana's image is merging and bleeds out of the top of the triangle with his arm and fist. Then there's lettering at the top and below it. At the top it says never again, below it says fight back in large letters. And then there's a byline at the bottom that describes what the pink triangle was. I think we were just learning that gay men and lesbians were persecuted by the Nazis.
Wow.
I don't think that was common knowledge.
It wasn't common knowledge.
That's why I put that byline on the bottom, about
I was going to ask about that. So at the bottom of the poster, it says, the pink triangle was used to identify the thousands of gay people who died in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. I mean, did you kind of assume, I guess, that people wouldn't know the history?
Yeah, I wanted it to be educational as well as I wanted to say, don't just take it, fight back. I sort of thought of Silvana as like the most radical queen that I knew. And so that's why I wanted him in the poster. I had great admiration for you.
Silvana, what's your reaction to that?
I'm a bit surprised. I mean, I'm
really?
Completely flattered. Totally. But I mean, I just saw myself as just one of the other people who were doing things.
Silvana, do you remember getting ready?
Well, yes, of course I had to decide what I was going to wear.
Well, I think I sort of asked you.
Oh, really?
Did you? I can't remember.
Well, I said, I want sort of Che Guevara revolutionary drag, and you had a beret. And
no problem with that.
Yeah, sort of army surplus and et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I just had like this funny little plaid shirt that I had on. Plaid, I mean, it was like, I wasn't a clown, okay?
I know, I was going to say, that's very Castro clone of you.
It was femi-clown.
Lesbian plaid.
And I had a jeans jacket on, I believe.
I think so.
And this little long scarf around my neck, of course. And a beret. I mean, that was to be a revolutionary with a star on it, which I used to wear all the time anyway.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yes.
Oh, I was wondering what that little, it's like it shows up as a pink dot, kind of.
It was a lavender star.
And were you wearing a wig?
No, that was my hair.
Silvana, had you done any modeling before?
Other than every day.
Other than all my life. Every time my parents took a picture.
Just backing up a little bit, for those of us who, grew up in the age of computers, how did you make it? Like without Photoshop, literally, how did you make this poster?
Well, it was all done by hand. So I shot him in the backyard, his backyard, and I think a whole contact sheet of poses. He was running at me with his arm raised, and I think originally had a knife in his hand. Which
Whoa, really?
They had to crop it out.
Had to take that away and just make it a fist. So that's how that got there.
Wait, how did you decide to take the knife out?
I think I just thought it was too violent. And
I think you made the right decision.
That becomes a very different image.
yeah, I think it was the right decision. Had to take that away and just make it a fist. So that's how that got there. Graphics was done with paste up and a stack camera. So I took the photo of Silvana and I put it in a stack camera. And
Sorry, what's a stack camera?
well, it's
You
a
have to
big.
explain all of these terms. They're like, you're talking about ancient technology.
It's a big camera that was used for graphics, and it does everything high contrast and halftone. It's oriented vertically rather than horizontally. So you put what you're photographing on the base near the floor, and then the camera part's above that, and it can be adjusted up and down, and et cetera. So what I did with that photograph was I probably made several copies at different exposures, but it turns everything into either black or white.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you can do that in Photoshop too, but this was something else. So it took a lot of tests to get it just right, to get the amount of detail I wanted, or not too much detail, or I might have even used several and cut them apart and piece them back together,
wow.
and that sort of thing. And then and I don't remember the process exactly, but the lettering was probably Letraset, which is a press type thing. And I don't know if you know what that is, or if
No, I don't.
Well, they were these sort of waxy letters on a plastic sheet that you would put down on paper and rub over it.
Huh.
Like scribble over it, sort of you do it like you do with the lotteries that are scratched,
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So it was a pretty complicated process.
Yeah, it sounds extremely labor intensive.
I mean, we sold that poster and gave the funds to the Briggs Initiative.
Larry, I'm going to prime you now.
Okay.
Selling the poster
What about it?
in Oakland to that book.
Oh,
This is
right.
This is the best story.
yeah. So I was, for some reason, kind of got to be in charge of taking the poster around to bookstores mainly that we thought would carry it. And so I took it to this women's bookstore in Oakland. I think it was Separatist.
So separatist meaning they didn't want to have much to do with gay men.
Men, period. Mm-hmm. We were just as bad as the other ones.
Yeah, if you had a dick, they didn't want you. So anyway, so I took the poster there, and I mean, they were nice enough, I guess, but I showed it to them, and they wanted to know if the person in the poster, Silvana, was a man or a woman. And I wouldn't say.
Wow. So they were thinking, if there's a man on this poster, we're not selling it in our women's bookstore.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So I didn't tell them. But they took the poster and sold it.
Well, maybe it speaks to how intense the anger was about the Briggs Initiative that they were willing to do it anyway.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. I don't know. Silvana and I and all of us in that radical drag community were feminists. So it wasn't like I went in there with an attitude. I understood their position, and if they'd said no, I probably would have just accepted it and left. But for whatever reason, they took it.
Wow. I have to say, not to get all, Oakland lesbian separatist bookstore about it, but when I saw the image, I kind of assumed it was a cisgender lesbian in the photo. And that's what I thought until we found you. And I love that so much.
You found out the dirty truth.
And then I was like, wow, let me call myself in and question my assumptions there. But I thought it was so beautiful, especially when I learned the story about how, you were both part of a community that was in its own way, ostracized or oppressed within the gay scene.
Yeah. I think a lot of the reason that cloney gay men or other more straight identified gay men didn't like us was that it brought up their own feelings and their own childhood feelings about being sissies and being put down for that, which, I think most gay men had that experience, and that they didn't want to be reminded of that.
Yeah.
And it made them afraid of us, I think.
Yeah, reveling in it was our way of getting over it.
Right. With the knife.
I know, I love that detail. Like that would have been a totally different poster. I want to ask you some more specific questions about this poster. So in one of the episodes in our series, we tell the story of those first gay rainbow flags. And, we talk a little bit about what the rainbow flag represents. How do you see that symbol as different from the pink triangle? Do those represent two different things for you in terms of what they represent in the movement?
For me, at least, yes, they're different. The rainbow flag is more about inclusiveness, not just of LGBT, et cetera, people in the greater mix. And I think Jesse Jackson used the rainbow in his campaign. It's fairly benign, I think. Whereas the pink triangle, at least if you know what it means, it's a lot more stronger and more visceral
and historical.
And historical, yes. So that's the difference for me. What about you, Silvana?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I think it's historical and it's very strong, and the history is very intense. And although the rainbow flag represents gay liberation, which has its own set of history and oppression, its use is much more benign. Mm-hmm. I mean, the pink triangle was used in this poster, and then ACT UP used it. But it's every time it's used, it's very strong. Whereas the rainbow flag can be used, and it's just like a little flag you can wave.
Yeah. I do feel like even still, my friends and I will make a distinction between like pink triangle gays and rainbow flag gays. Like they feel very, very different to me, especially now with the association with ACT UP. It feels like the pink triangle is very much more associated with political activism. I think the rainbow flag more with, pride.
Yeah.
It's more of a social thing, whereas the pink triangle is more political, I think.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yes.
As some people have said, the style of the poster kind of predated the style of what ACT UP was doing in their graphics, which was very bold and in your face and not pretty.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true, but I'd like to think it is.
They're so related graphically.
Yeah.
Like Silence Equals Death is so related to that.
Yeah.
How does it feel to you to have your work kind of stand the test of time like that and be associated with this big moment?
Well, it's pretty great. The New York Public Library has it in their collection, and they did a show, and it was in that. And then a catalog or a book was written about graphics used in the gay movement, and it's included in that. The Lesbian Gay Historical Society has it. And then when the Harvey Milk terminal opened at San Francisco Airport a few years ago, they used it on the wall 9 feet tall.
Wow.
So it's been surprising. Yeah, it's been surprising and gratifying because it was almost 50 years ago. And I'm really glad that it still speaks to people,
I always thought it looked great. Graphically, I thought it was beautiful. The colors, I love. It's so bold with the black background. And, of course, I was happy and proud to be on it. It was exciting. The fact that it's still coming up to auction in places and stuff like that is so, I think it's great. And I think it does speak to how universal and timeless the message is and how it doesn't look dated at all.
Yeah.
I've dated, but it hasn't.
I just have a couple more questions more about, stuff happening today. One of the reasons why we wanted to explore this story now is because of this resurgent anti-queer, anti-trans backlash that's gaining steam around the country. I know. What has it been like for you, for both of you, to watch this sort of same narrative of gay people as groomers and recruiters and, child molesters take hold?
Didn't we learn any lessons? It's like, do we really have to go through this again? And the only thing I can do is fight back, is try to turn that ship around in whatever way that is possible for me. But it's quite demoralizing to see that after so much progress and so much struggle, that things are being allowed to revert back.
What has it been like for you, Larry?
Well, first of all, I just find it shocking that there's still people that think like that. I thought we were over that. Maybe it's just from living on the West Coast and I'm out of touch with the rest of the country, but I don't know. I'm from Iowa, and even though it's a red state, it's pretty good about gay stuff. I mean, my uncle and his partner lived in my little hometown in rural Iowa for years and years, and they were totally out. And, Iowa was one of the first states to have gay marriage, so it's confusing. I think that we're being used to generate fear of the other.
Absolutely. I think also that you can look at things and say it's a gloomy scenario, but I'm a positive person. I feel like it's always like you go uphill a little bit, then you go down a bit, and then you keep going. But there's a curve, and the curve is going up. And I feel like if we just keep at it, we'll get there. It's discouraging at this point in my life to think that, I still have to get out there and work and struggle. I thought things might get taken care of by this time in my life, but they haven't. And I mean, that's just reality. So you just have to keep doing it and hoping you're pushing the needle a little bit.
Maybe you need to pose for another poster.
Let's come up with a new one.
Well, thank you both so much. And again, I really can't thank you enough for allowing us to use that beautiful image. It's really just perfect to represent our show.
Good. I'm glad that worked.
Happy to.